Silverstone has a new 5U rack mount case. Yes. It has bays. And we're going to build an epic server. But good lord, it's going to take us an hour to get through the accessories and different configuration options with this case. It ships with 1 million accessories. Alright, let's unbox. You can tell this case might have been unboxed, reboxed a couple of times. This is what you call a short dip rack mount case, but it can also be used as a tower case. It's 5 rack units tall, which means that cooling is not an issue. And we've covered a lot of Silverstone stuff in the past, so if this is your first video, welcome. But you're definitely going to want to check out our other videos and other Silverstone stuff, because the Silverstone stuff that goes in this case can work really well. I'm talking about their AIO coolers, first of all, but also their power supplies and everything else. There's the first accessory box. Now you might have noticed that these are not the cheapest rack mount cases. And at the same time, Silverstone does a good job selling these and distributing these. People are willing to pay what these cost because they're absurdly high quality for what they are. To the extent that we've bought 3 or 4 of these to use around the office at 5U case. The older configuration, 52, I guess, or the 51, and now the 52, this thing. Oh, it's locked. We gotta unlock it. So there we go. It's a spring-loaded, fancy dust filtering, sort of awesome front panel mechanism. And now you can see what's different about this generation. Look, there's 2 5¼ inch bays. Now, what do you get in the accessory box? First, you get a set of feet. This can be used in a tower configuration, something akin to that, but these little feet will space it off the ground and prevent it from tipping, which is awesome. There's a substitute power supply bracket, so if you're not going to use an ATX power supply bracket, you can use this one. You can actually run dual power supplies with this case. It can have one that's fully internal. There's a knockout on the back and an accessory cable for connecting power to an internal power supply, but you will have to use like an SFX type power supply for that option. There are also redundant power supplies that will fit in this case, so you can have, dual hot swap cases, and that's why this plate for the power supply is modular as it is. The RM53502 has a lot of clever engineering in it, and if you're considering this case, it would behoove you to download the manual and just look at what they did in the manual to understand the options better. These brackets are for the 1+1 redundant power supply configuration, like the hot swap power supply configuration option. This is a fan bracket, 60mm, dual 60mm. You can put this on the back of the case. This will make the depth of the case a little bit more, but this can bring fresh air in from the back and dump it in the PCI Express area, which is great if you've got cards like Mellanox cards or like the Bluefield accelerators or really high performance GPUs like RTX Pro 6000s. This can make the difference between your cards overheating and not overheating, especially if you're running like a 4 GPU configurations. Like for the RTX Pro 6000 Max Q, you're going to want to use this accessory with some high performance 60mm fans, the thick ones. Thick. There's also some 4-pin fan extensions, which is great. You've also got the rack mount ears, so you can put rack mount ears on it and have, carry handles at the front, basically. It's also designed for rails, so Silverstone has a rail accessory kit you can order. There's also a bag of screws, cable retention, everything you need to mount the motherboard and deal with some of the internal accessories. Now, internally, there are also some accessories which are awesome. There's that power supply extension I was mentioning. Internally, there's also some accessories that are awesome, which I want to show you. PCI Express retention brackets and that sort of thing. So give me just 1 second and we'll get it torn apart. They stole my screwdriver again. All right, so inside, there's a lot going on. First, you can see we've got room at the front to mount a 360mm radiator directly. Our 2 5¼ inch bays are here. It comes with 2 accessory fans that are already pre-mounted here. There's room for another one here. You got the chamber for your power supply. You can mount 2.5 inch drives here along the top. You got plenty of room for cabling. These sections are removable. There's even a second layer of built-in dust filter. So these fingers, in case you don't know, they're meant to grab on to PCIe cards to prevent them from shifting around. So if you have a machine that you have to transport or move around a lot, these are awesome. And you can tighten them or loosen them with the thumb screws there, so you can really lock these into place if you need to. They're also movable laterally, so you can have 2 fingers holding a really wide card, So if you put a giant GPU in here, you could use a bunch of these to hold it in place from slipping out. You can also, I mean, there's so many accessory screw holes that you can also do like the full length mounting option. You really got a lot of flexibility. All right, so internally, with all those brackets off, you can kind of see what we're working with. It's a very similar layout to last generation. This bracket can be used for drives or the SFX power supply. Remember, the SFX power supply is fed from this extra power connector at the top. Optionally, if you want to run dual power supplies. I know some of those workstation class motherboards will use that. So Threadripper, so this is not a bad choice for building a Threadripper machine. You can use it in a tower configuration, like I say, instead of rack mount. Change your mind later and do rack mount. But look how short depth it is. It's a very, very short depth if you do decide to use it as a rack mount. For the front panel, we've got USB Type-C, 2 Type-A, a bunch of LEDs. So it's got extra LEDs compared with normal ATX, but those are standard 2-pin, 0.1 headers. You can see there's also 2.5-inch brackets in the bottom of the case there. You can relocate those to other areas if you need to. There's also some hooks for a mounting accessory here. So you could slide something in here and screw it down, depending on what you're doing, an extra bracket to hold things. Plenty of clearance for that 360mm radiator. You do a push-pull configuration here, no problem. This really does pair nicely with the Silverstone AIOs that we've covered in our other videos. The 360mm coolers are designed for server use cases and like server torture tests, and 5 years is not unreasonable to expect out of that type of an AIO. And for server CPUs that use 300, 400, 500 watts, yeah, it can work really well. They also have a version that's dual cold plate, so you could run a 2 socket motherboard with one extra thick 360mm radiator. I'm running that right now on Milan Vcache CPUs, 3D Vcache CPUs for one of the machines that we were using for AI quantization that we've done like a million other videos on. And Epic, like if you use like iklama.cpp and you're doing some of the less dense layer offload to CPU, it can be really nice having fast memory and fast CPUs and everything else like that. We've been experimenting with some of the new bleeding edge code that takes advantage of like rotating the model layers so that things are breadth first instead of depth first. And it seems to have some cache line implications. So it's been nice to have the large 3D Vcache CPUs to test that on, because, having a gigabyte of L3 cache is handy, but I digress. I also really like, because this is a 5U case, you get a 140mm exhaust fan. Oh, and there's also a physical mechanical chassis intrusion switch. Just about all modern motherboards have an intrusion switch if you look for it. Threadripper motherboards, server motherboards, certainly. You can add that to your motherboard header, and even if the computer's off, it'll know, because it uses the CMOS circuit. Well, most motherboards use the CMOS circuit. So that if somebody opens the case, even if it's off or unplugged, it'll be flagged. You'll know. Yeah, I like Silverstone case design. All right, let's get a system in this. Oh, the motherboard that I've selected for this is the Genoa 8UD2T X550. And the CPU we're going to use for this is the AMD EPYC 9554. Zen 4? That's old news. No, it's so good. So this motherboard is a little weird. It is not an ATX motherboard. It only has 8 memory channels exposed instead of 12. And it's only 4 X16 slots, but they are really X16. And then there's tons of MCIO connectivity. 4 8-lane MCIO headers plus a bonus MCIO header and dual onboard M.2. It has onboard dual 10 gig and VGA, and really that's basically it. It's only got 2 USB ports. This doesn't even have front panel USB-C. It doesn't even have a standard ATX power connector. Okay, in the motherboard box, there is a standard ATX power adapter, but this motherboard is actually compatible with very, very inexpensive 1+1 redundant power supplies, because it only needs 12 volts of input, which is very nice. And so, yeah, that simplifies things a little bit for builds and redundancies. For now, and for the sake of this video, I'm just going to use an ATX power supply. Nothing special there. The server class power supply, that Silverstone sells, are very nice. We've also done videos on ASRock enhanced desktop, like Threadripper power supplies that have built-in temperature sensors for, those overheating 12V2 connectors. Be sure to check that out. Just a reputable power supply. I think for now I'm going to do FSP, because I'm probably going to replace the FSP ATX power supply with one of the 1+1 redundant ones. That's just 12 volts out through a connector. But it wasn't here yet, so we'll just roll with that. Now, this case does not come with any motherboard standoffs pre-installed, so you're going to have to do that. Now, the standoffs are very, very case specific. So any accessories and things that you don't use in this build, label the box and put them inside the case, or do your future self a favor and don't lose track of those. The standoffs for this case are pretty tall. And that's probably, something to do with that, is this is a 5U case after all. For this particular motherboard, I have 6 holes. I have used 6 standoffs. Let's see if they line up. Ooh, almost. Not quite. There you go. There's where the standoffs go. Enhance! Enhance! Let's do another test fitting. Hey, all of our holes line up pretty good. All right. Now, this motherboard does not have a built-in I/O shield, so it's in the box, and the processor is not installed, and the memory is not installed. I find it's easier to install the processor and memory, and maybe the cooling, depending on if it's a tower or AIO. Now, my preference would be to use 360 AIO, the Silverstone, for this build, but I didn't have one handy, and I'm only putting the 9655 in here. This is only a 360 watt EPIC CPU, so I'm going to use a tower cooler. This is a Freezer 4U SP5, this is SP5 version. Arctic makes some of the best tower coolers that you can get, especially if you want, 5.9's reliability. And so you should look at those too if you're doing these kinds of builds. Look at that chonker. Look at those copper heat pipes. This is a serious cooler. The only real downside with these coolers is if you want to use your own fans, you have to 3D print a bracket to hold it. But Arctic makes some seriously good fans too. So, you really wouldn't be out of line using Arctic fans for the rest of the build. And I may end up doing that. If you've never seen an SP5 cooler, up to 12 memory channels, there's 6 mounting screws instead of 4. And yeah, they have a specific order they have to go in as well. I'm gonna need to clean that up and apply some new paste. Arctic also bundles some of their top-end Arctic MX6 thermal paste. It's very nice thermal paste. For memory, I'm gonna just install 256 gigabytes of memory because memory is insanely expensive right now. And I got a really good deal on this Kingston Fury Renegade Pro. It's DDR5 registered ECC. So 256 gigs total. And now we're basically ready to mount our fans. Isn't that fantastic? Clears the heat sinks at the VRM at the front and rear. Plenty of room around the RAM for airflow to flow this way, because cooling your RAM is very important. Notice the front area is open here, unlike on Threadripper motherboards. This memory is actually easier to cool. Ta-da! Isn't that beautiful? And now think about how you can accessorize this case and do something interesting while I change my batteries. All right, boom. We got our fans mounted in the front. 320 millimeter fans. Silverstone makes some excellent fans. Arctic makes some excellent fans. You really can't go wrong. The FSP group, 1650 watt power supply. This has 2 600 watt power connectors, so I can run, 2 RTX 6000 GPUs in this chassis. One of them will hang off the end of the motherboard, or I can use the MCIO connectors to go back to a PCIe slot and locate it, in the bottom of the chassis where it can breathe a little bit more, but not actually be plugged into the motherboard. Our modular power supply will let me use, whatever cables, and I think that'll work really well. So, yeah, that should be a lot of fun. This is the new 1650 watt power supply, the Mega TI from FSP. We've reviewed FSP before because I like FSP, and FSP makes server power supplies that I trust with systems that cost tens of thousands of dollars. Look at this glorious modulus power supply. Modulus power supply? Yes. Someone set us up the bomb. Oh, that's old. That's an older meme, sir. It checks out. All right, look at all this cool stuff that it comes with. Cable combs and Velcro and 4 thumb screws and a test plug. The test plug so you can turn it on with water cooling. It's your manual. FSP power never ends. Like I say, I do have a soft spot for FSP because FSP is within a lot of my servers, like a lot of them. And it's nice to see them branching out. We got the giant, North American power connector. So this power supply, the label says that it's 1500 watts. If you are in the 100 to 200 volt input and at 240 volts input, that's when you get the 1650. So you're 120 watts on everything that's not 12 volts and 1500 at the remainder, 137.5 amps. What a nice rocker switch at the back. We've also got our little eco switch, which is on or off. We will turn that off so that the power supply fan runs all the time. Again, FSP, like just the little things, the manual, should you need to download the manual, actually has the pinouts for the cables. Pay attention, other power supply vendors that mix up the cables from one generation of power supply to the next and create dangerous situations. Yeah, there's no standardized pinouts. You want to keep the power supply and its modular cables together, because if you don't, and then it's like, oh, this power supply cable fits, you might be wiring it backwards, or you might be swapping a 12 volt line with a 3.3 volt line. It will end very badly. If there's ever any question, you can use this and a voltmeter in order to troubleshoot and test and say, okay, yes, this is a confirmed FSP style power connector. Now, storage. It's going to be an external disk shelf. This is basically another storage server upgrade, but the storage server is going to be doing double duty now for AI. That's going to be another different video. Well, not really AI. It's going to be doing a lot of things through GPU compute. I'm going to be using AI GPUs, probably not that one, but transcoding, automatic closed captioning, and that sort of thing, which might actually help us in terms of finding things like, oh, where was the clip that was about this? It was like, I don't know. But if it can automatically close caption and find the thing, then maybe that'll be really good. Kioxia is helping us out there with storage. It's just massive amounts of storage. Now, these are older CD6 drives, but for this use case, it is going to be perfect. So all of the cache, models, everything that has to go fast is going to be stored on those. Now, in the past, I have used ICDock docks for this, but if I use the ICDock docks for this, then it's going to be in this machine, and I'm not going to be able to show the ICDock docks in future videos where it's like, you should use an ICDock for this. I'm literally just going to 3D print some brackets. And this makes hot swap a little bit more annoying, but Kioxia storage doesn't die. So I'm just going to mount them in this. And if one of them dies, yeah, I'll have to shut down the server and like figure out which drive it is. And it's not as convenient as like an ICDock hot swap, but I can use these two in my two 5¼ inch base. That's going to give me room for 8 2.5 inch, 15 millimeter tall drives, SAS, NVMe, whatever it is I want to run. And remember, because this motherboard, even though it only has 4 slots, it has 4 8-lane MCIO headers at the front end of the motherboard. Now, I've shown in the past cables that'll go from those to 2 NVMe. So I can just use all the MCIO headers on this, and boom, right there, 8 NVMe from the system. That's pretty awesome. So for the expansion slots, if I've got 25 gig NIC and our SAS controller for our external disk shelf, and an RTX 6000 or a 5090 or something hanging off the end of the motherboard, I still have one X16 slot completely free for whatever, and one 4-lane MCIO connector. So I've got a lot of options and flexibility in this case, and there's so much room and so many mount points that I can just 3D print whatever I want. So let's get this thing put together, buttoned up, and see how it works. Well, we can do first post and make sure that it works. Whoops. Got a fan sticking in a fan. Fan cable sticking in a fan. Hey, look at that. I got my fans hooked up. I'm going to have to get a Y extension cable for the 2 fans at the top. Plenty of airflow through this chassis, which is what they expect, especially with that DDR5 memory. Postcode 07. Ooh, it's trying. One of these things is not like the other. Postcode 00. Looks like it's going to train the memory. 4FC8. Ooh, it's trying. It booted! It's booting! Congratulations. You built a server. See, that wasn't that hard. This is a great way to experiment. I mean, especially these Zen 4 CPUs. So like, you can get unlocked Zen 4 CPUs on eBay pretty inexpensively. If you're doing scientific compute, computational fluid dynamics, anything that requires AVX 512, it really is worth the upgrade to Zen 5. But for a file storage server that is going to be used for experiments and running scripts, and like we've been working on our own like graphing benchmarking software, like to help organize the notes and move a little faster on that kind of stuff. There's not a huge difference between Zen 4 and Zen 5. Zen 5 is definitely faster, running more server type stuff. But if you can get Zen 4 on fire sale, or somebody's used Zen 4 Epic on eBay, used secondary market, building a system like this to experiment with, especially if you're on something older, is really handy. Not just for the home lab, but also just can it really be that much of a difference if you're on, 3+ year-old server infrastructure and you need to experiment with something modern without spending a whole bunch of money to know, because things have changed that much in the last 3 years, not just performance wise. It's not necessarily just drop in performance. The geometry of the system and the configuration of the system has changed a fair bit. And so if you were going to build like a high availability cluster with something like this, then you could, build 3 or 4 or 5 of these inexpensive chassis and then scale from there. And you don't have to put quite as much redundancy in each chassis when you've got 3 of them or 5 of them. And so it opens up some interesting possibilities. But for now, that's pretty much all we have to do for this. Let's get this buttoned up and see how it works. All right, and this is what we ended up for internals. This is a little different than the last generation case, which I'll show you in just a second. So this comes out, the thing that holds the PCIe cards, and it's in there horizontally. That'll be important in a second. We got our dual 5¼ inch bays here. Again, fitting 8 or even 12 of those 2.5 inch Kioxia SSDs in this chassis is no problem, even before I use my, 3D printed 5¼ inch bay accessory. Well, that'll give you 8, and then, adding 4 more, you get 2 at the bottom there. But like these brackets have a lot of mounting holes, a lot of options for mounting drives, 2.5 inch, 3.5 inch. Silverstone is leaving less stones unturned. See what I did there? Just to give you an idea, I got my other server. The new one, the old one. The new one, the old one. Now, our old Silverstone chassis has the Zeus 1650R power supply that Silverstone sent me a while ago. That power supply is fantastic. It has served its purpose incredibly well. Notice that this design doesn't have nearly as many as like the cross braces and cross members. So this chassis actually does have a fair bit more flex in it. If you were going to mount this, like actually legit mount it on a 2-post rack, it's going to flex a lot more than this one. I think officially, 2-post, it'd be better to put this on a 2-post rack with an officially supported shelf. I don't think Silverstone is going to officially sign off on, yes, this is suitable for a 2-post rack, because you could put some really heavy stuff in it and how you have it configured. But the new chassis design, because of all of this cross-member stuff, is incredibly more rigid. This one was absurdly rigid before because this is a really high-quality case. It's made of really thick folded metal. You'll be surprised how heavy and unwielding it is to begin with. But this one is even more brick-like. The new design is even more brick-like than the old one, and I was impressed by the old one. Normally there's a bar that runs in the middle here that has the same kind of fingers for grabbing the cards. It has the same rear, optional fan. This little rubber hole is for the cables for the fans so that you can route the, the power for the fans back inside the case. And so I've taken out that bracket here, and you can see that even though I've got the giant fans in the front, I still have the 360mm radiator mounted. So that worked fine in the old design. There is one thing that I do like about the old design, and that is that the USB and the power buttons are accessible even when the front is on. Now this front is a cooler mechanism. There's a latch. This is just friction fit. So the friction fit's a little different. It's got a pretty good dust filter, as evidenced by the lack of cleaning that I've been doing, but there you go. There's just side-by-side differences. Now, in terms of airflow and dealing with high heat generation cards, the new design is doing a little bit better, especially with the RTX Pro 6000s. I've had 2 RTX Pro 6000s in this chassis. I've had 2 RTX Pro 6000s in this chassis at this point. And I got to say, this chassis, the newer chassis, is doing a little bit better because I've got, 360mm in the front plus the 260mm. And that is doing a little bit better than my, the dual 180mm. I could add, 3 more 120 mils on a radiator. So like, if I wanted an equivalent amount of cooling, I need to add 3 more fans at the front and probably add those 2 fans, the 2 optional fans for the rear. But I think I like the new chassis design better overall. So I'll probably swap some things around to deal with that. But yeah, there you go. There's the new Silverstone 5U rack mount chassis that also makes a competent tower case. You just mount the feet on it and then boom, you're gonna get that. And that looks pretty good. This maybe looks a little better as a tower. Although honestly, they're both really competent. Silverstone makes high-end stuff. And rarely have I been disappointed by Silverstone stuff. Oh, there's another minor improvement. The rivets are removable. So on this side, the accessories for mounting rails are built into the case. They're not removable. On this side, they're Phillips head. You can unscrew them. So there you go. That's another small improvement. Silverstone, learning, improving. I like it. Well, Model List Level 1, that's been a quick look at that. If you have any questions about this case, or you want to see it in a different build, or you're considering it for your build, or more importantly, if you build with this and you want to post pictures on the internet, because people love posting pictures and commenting on them, and that could help your psyche and your ego, come to the forum at Level 1. I'm going to go sign out and look for those pictures now. You can find me in the Level 1 forums. All right, I'm signing out, and I'll see you there.